Hi, so this topic is going to be about censorship, specifically censorship within a large Facebook group called Subtle Asian Traits. So the background is Subtle Asian Traits is one of the largest Facebook groups in existence. I think it's somewhere around 19th or 20th. It has almost 2 million members. It began a few years ago as just a lighthearted meme group, but like most popular social media groups, it grew and more topics were included, including politics. For the most part, it tries to stay out of politics, but it hasn't been too successful. I mean, who can really avoid politics today anyway? My main gripe against them was that they seem to have taken a side, being more left leaning, being more woke leaning, not just left leaning, but woke leaning, and more identitarian politics leaning. And specifically regarding Black Lives Matter, most of the posts they've approved have been allied with Black Lives Matter. And I felt they crossed the line a few weeks ago when one of the moderators, well, he took a side, supported Black Lives Matter, and closed the discussion. So my issue isn't so much that that they're sided with Black Lives Matter. People obviously are entitled to their political leanings, but the issue is that they took a side and then they censored the other side, and they also took a side when the original purpose of this group was not for a politics. So there are several problems with this. One is, well, if you take a side, you already present it as truth, right? And if you don't present opposing views, then people that read this don't have enough information to self determine their own stance. Um, Now, Facebook or subtle Asian traits even is not the only source of news for people, but we see increasingly that social media is the either the only or at least a very big source of where people get their news and ideas from. So it is by no means negligible, especially when this group is 2 million people and the average number of views for mainstream media outlets don't even hit a million. So there's definitely incredible reach with this. Um, I called the moderator out. I said it was unethical for him to post one view and then close it to comments and not have any responses. This is sort of the last straw. I was already kind of tired of seeing left leaning posts being approved and no opposing views being posted by the administration. So we had a debate. I had to pay $400. Yeah, he wouldn't talk to me unless I paid for his time. To be fair, though, he says he will donate that $400. So, as scummy as it was in the beginning, at least I think he's going to, give it to good purpose, to give it towards protecting, Asians against hate crime. So our discussion was mainly on Black Lives Matter, and well, I mean, there are some things we both agree with Black Lives Matter. We do agree there is some existence of systemic racism, but my whole point was, and my whole gripe against Black Lives Matter in general is it's not as big as they say, not even nearly as big as they say. Um, and the two talking points was disparities in incarceration and disparities in police brutality. And essentially, it boiled down to the disparities have confounding factors. And what that means is if you just take raw statistics, there are large disparities. Like, at blacks serve 75% longer incarceration rates, or you've heard 20% as well. But these are just superficial statistics. They don't give you a good picture. It's like saying, describe yourself and you only give you your height. What does that even mean, right? So these studies that I provided dig deeper. They dig into the criminal background and how they were sentenced. And those are very important because, um, as you'll see in the conversation, when determining sentencing, if you are more violent, if you are a criminal that keeps repeating their crimes, you're going to get longer and longer time. And that's very sensible. That's not racist. That is, any rational person would see that a violent person is of utmost danger to society, and a repeated felon or a repeated criminal, right? It means that they're not learning the lesson. Now, you could talk about other things like, oh, well, they might not be able to get out of their situation. And yes, those are valid. But we're talking specifically about the justice system. It's not the justice system's role to make sure there are enough jobs for, ex-cons or something like that. That's a different discussion, which does need to be had, but it's not the discussion regarding justice. So it's important to keep that in mind. And we didn't, we barely even had time to talk one talk. They're so complicated. Essentially, what it boiled down to, though, was after accounting for these factors, the disparity between black and white incarceration rate dropped down to 9%. And this is a study that took 36,000 cases from 2006 to 2008, and it said that the main disparities was due to mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums, in case you don't know, they are statutes that the federal government puts on all local jurisdictions, which says you must have X amount of time for X amount of crime. And this was obviously to prevent local jurisdictions from being too lenient. People may be too lenient for a number of reasons. Maybe they got, maybe the person on trial is their friend or someone they know, or they favor a certain race over another. So, these that's the impetus behind mandatory minimums. So it should be noted that one of the greatest mandatory minimums that caused disparities in the past decades, before 2010, was the difference between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. We didn't get a lot of time to talk about that, unfortunately, but they evened the score between those two drugs in 2010. So this study took the trials before cases before 2010. So if anything, the disparities nowadays should be less. But even still, after analyzing these 36,000 cases, there was only a nine average of 9% disparity, not 175%, not 120%, just an extra 9%, or 109%. So that is far less than what BLM and their allied journalists and activists and even academics say. And that 9% was an average. But the study also did a sort of worst case scenario if mandatory minimums were very, very, very prejudiced against, discriminatory against blacks. And I quote here, it says, to generate an upper bound, we reverse the assumption and assign the minimum possible criminal history score to all black defendants with missing criminal histories, and the maximum possible score for the white defendants with missing criminal histories. Under these extreme assumptions, the conditional effect of race at the median ranges from 5 to 11%. So the upper bound they estimated was somewhere from 5 to 11%. The average disparity was 9%. And it gave the honest to talk about and investigate mandatory minimums more. So that was the other part of the debate. We talked about mandatory minimums all across the board. Crime, trials, mandatory minimums. Um, black defendants were more violent. They were more repeated criminals, even accounting for socioeconomic level. So I think in the second study they had by county, and the counties were the same GDP per capita for the black and white defendants that they studied. And that's pretty much most of it. Now, is 9%, noteworthy? Yeah, absolutely. That's not saying we should ignore this problem. But it is, if you present a problem greater than it is, especially when we get into policing and police brutality, what do you think the suspect is going to feel? If the suspect feels that, and because you've told them that police are going to shoot him dead, or if they somehow survive the police encounter, that they're going to get double the incarceration time that they should, well, it'd be reasonable to expect that they would act in a manner that would be violently defensive. I mean, that's very understandable, right? If that's what you believe. So by escalating the disparities, especially with, and obviously journalists do this to get views, right? Because it's a business. It's another part of the problem. But if you do that, then you're going to make things worse. You're going to make things worse for everybody. The suspects are going to be more resistant, and the police are probably going to be the ones that have to take the brunt of that force. They're going to have to fight more, which again will cause more accidents. So it's like it's a feedback loop. And not only that, but of course, if you overestimate it and you then try to correct these disparities with more lenient policies for blacks or something like that, what are you going to get? You're going to get more criminals on the streets, which is exactly what we see in the Northwest. I'm from Bay Area, so, over here we got a prosecutor that Chesa Baldwin, whose parents were they were actual terrorists. They were far leftist terrorists who were involved in, I think, either a bombing or assassination in the '60s. And then he was raised by their terrorist group founder, Bill Ayers. So who knows how much indoctrination it is? But I mean, it's very clear. He called like this murderer from a black man, the guy, the random black guy that just ran up and shoved the 84-year-old Thai man to the ground. And the Thai guy died. He called that a temper tantrum recently, right? And there's all sorts of other stats. Like I think he's prosecuted like 20-some%, 24% less robberies or something like that. Just these guys, they're the bad guys, right? They're the ones, and I don't like to simplify things, but they want to be virtuous, right? Or I don't know what deep down inside they really want, but they want to have the public opinion of them being virtuous. But then they protect criminals who destroy other people's lives or sometimes literally kill them. And and then they pretend like they're the saviors. So in other areas of the United States, maybe they do need more correction on white and black disparity. But over here, we're seeing a lot of the opposite. And that's why we've seen, skyrocketing crime rates for the past. Well, that's one of the reasons why we've seen, upward trends of crime, especially property crime within the last 8, 9 years. Anyway, so we moved on to police brutality, and that one actually was pretty simple. We agreed on that. Police brutality is, I showed the Fryer paper. In case you don't know, Roland G. Fryer was or is he's one of the top economics professors in Harvard, so therefore probably in the world. Brilliant guy. He grew up actually, I think in pretty poor conditions in Florida, and then he rose to prominence by becoming the highest paid economics professor in Harvard. So he did a study, which is very thorough, about the racial disparities in police brutality, and then he followed up. I'm sorry, we should talk about. So basically, he concluded that under circumstances where all circumstances considered, so where police had to act to defend their lives or perceived imminent threat, his study showed there was no disparities. So that in fact, he showed that blacks even have slightly less likelihood to be shot or killed by police. he did find out that there was more disparity. There was disparity in low level force. That means using hands. So like grabbing, handcuffing, um, stop and frisk. So that's important to understand too. So we're not denying the existence here. We're just trying to get the scale right because, like we said earlier, if you get the scale wrong, you're gonna have an improper response. So he did a follow up study where he showed that the fallout or the backlash from viral videos of BLM related cases resulted in 1,000 extra homicides, 40,000 extra felonies within 2 years of just 6 cities he studied. Just six. So he was very clear that the response to these, to these viral cases that BLM lauds is doing a lot more harm than good. And that's the impetus why we need to talk about it. The story isn't as simple as we're just trying to fight white supremacy. There's a lot of nuance. Okay, now getting into the end part. We talked about the censorship. Essentially, I don't think he really had a good answer for that. In fact, he said something rather disturbing. He said in a poll they took, 60% of the members wanted political posts, but no responses allowed to the political posts. Now, just from my general impression, about 60% of people in subtle Asian traits are left leaning. So they supported the mostly left leaning posts, and then they don't want to talk about it. Therefore, the the problem of censorship here. So I talked to I told him you gotta either do no politics or let people talk about it and kick out trolls as necessary. So if there's just people just screaming obscenities, fine, I get it, right? It's going to alert Facebook, and then they're gonna shut down the group. So that's no good either. I will say though that the problem with race politics in America is that it's still very outdated. I mean, it's really shocking that we haven't progressed enough yet in this conversation because the '92 LA riots was definitive proof that this is not just a black on white matter. It is a black, white, Asian, even all these subgroups, Latinos, everyone is trampling on somebody, and by just trying to play with two metrics or one metric really of two variables, you're going to tread on other people without even realizing it. Or maybe they do realize and they don't care. I kind of feel it's more the latter. And thus we need to really talk about the reasons behind black and Asian crime. And it's it's getting bad. It's getting really bad in Bay Area. Especially since the left covers for it by saying it's from Trump and the white supremacy. Look, most of the cases that we're seeing, or at least here, are from San Francisco. 85% of San Francisco voted for Biden. It is so anti-Trump there. It's probably the most anti-Trump place in the world. You can't even wear a MAGA hat. Not that I am. I don't subscribe to that, by the way. But I've seen people. You can't even wear. They can't even wear a MAGA hat without being attacked, assaulted. All right. So in one of the most anti-Trump places, we have some of the most anti-Asian crimes. So go figure, right? Anyway, so hope you check out the debate. And definitely read the articles if you can, because the debate was not enough time to address everything. And hopefully we can get more exposure to this, because Asian voices aren't heard enough. And I think that non-far leftist people would really love to have more of the non-black and white discussion in this. All right, thanks.